The only thing tested that morning was my self-control. It was 5:37 a.m. when I heard the crash. Not the wind, not a branch. A crash, like a battering ram colliding with my front gate. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding like I'd just been dropped into a war zone. Kylie clutched our 2-year-old son, Michael, as we scrambled downstairs. Another bang. A man's voice outside yelling, "HOA inspection, property violation. Open up or we'll take it down." It didn't make sense. We didn't have a violation. We didn't even have an HOA, not officially. But there they were, 2 men in utility vests, one with a clipboard, the other with a crowbar. Our gate was shattered. Our security camera yanked down. They stood at the foot of our porch, preparing to breach the front door. I called 911. Kylie screamed, "We have a baby!" But they didn't stop. That's when I grabbed my father's old Marine Corps saber off the wall. I didn't point it at them. I just stepped outside and said, "You've got 10 seconds to back off before this becomes a felony." They left. Fast, but the damage was done. Michael was inconsolable for hours. Kylie was shaking, and I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was cold, calm, calculating, because something didn't add up. They had no warrant, no ID. And the so-called HOA they mentioned had been defunct for over 8 years. It was supposed to be just a quiet morning at our family cottage. Instead, it was, we bought the cottage to disappear. Not from the law, not from shame, just from noise. I spent 12 years in the Marines, Afghanistan, Djibouti, Okinawa. Saw more in a decade than most see in a lifetime. When I got out, I didn't want medals. I wanted silence, trees, a garden, a place where my wife could sleep without nightmares, and my son could learn to ride his bike without checking over his shoulder. We found that place on the edge of Millersville, tucked deep past the pines where no GPS dared go. A forgotten cottage built in the 70s. Cedar wood, sun-stained shutters, a porch that groaned like an old man. It was perfect. Kylie loved it from the moment she saw the wildflowers around the fence. I loved it for the soil, rich and dark and patient. Michael loved it because the squirrels didn't run away when he clapped his tiny hands. Fred, our neighbor, brought over sweet tea on our second day. He was in his late 60s, wore a Vietnam vet hat like armor, and always said, "We keep to ourselves out here, son. City folks don't get it." We got it. We kept to ourselves. We planted tomatoes. We painted the nursery. Kylie started a small Etsy shop for handcrafted soaps and oils. I started fixing up the house board by board. We were quiet. We were grateful. And for a while, life was still. Then came the letter. No logo, no signature. Just a typewritten notice slipped under our door. Unauthorized modifications to structure. Violation of HOA Rule 6.2. You have 7 days to comply. It was laughable. There was no active HOA. The community had voted it out nearly a decade ago after the previous board had dissolved under embezzlement charges. Fred confirmed it. Ain't no HOA since 2015. Just some city snakes still pretending they've got power. I shrugged it off, but Kylie didn't. She saw shadows where I didn't. Heard tires crunching gravel late at night. Noticed fresh footprints near the garden. I told her it was probably some overzealous wannabe with too much time. I was wrong. There was something older here. Something buried under the roots of this place. And someone didn't want us here. At first, it was little things. An anonymous complaint about our mailbox being non-regulation. Then a fine for excessive lawn height, delivered by a man with no badge and no name. Then a notice. Demolition order pending for structural non-compliance. We laughed. At first. Then the city called. Then the bank froze our renovation funds, citing legal uncertainty of ownership rights. Then Kylie cried, and I stopped laughing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a siege. Her name was Karen. Yes, really. Not just in spirit or stereotype, but in black ink on the flimsy HOA notice I finally got my hands on. Karen Elizabeth Norwood, acting president of the Millersville Preservation Society, a name that hadn't appeared in public records since 2017. But Karen was very much alive. I met her one crisp Tuesday morning at the town clerk's office. Petite, surgically sharp cheekbones, and a smile that cut like wire. She wore a tan suit that looked ironed by fear and moved like she owned the oxygen in the room. "Oh," she said with mock surprise, "you must be the Cottage guy." "I'm the homeowner," I replied. She tilted her head, for now. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, cold, dismissive, like I was gum on her courtroom heels. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable was wrapped in the invisible armor of bureaucracy, the kind you can't punch, can't shoot, can't outshout. She claimed her HOA had been quietly reinstated by a minority vote and that certain legacy clauses still gave them jurisdiction over the property due to a loophole involving parcel codes and old zoning maps. She spoke like a lawyer, even though she wasn't one. She didn't need credentials. She had control. Karen didn't knock on doors. She didn't issue warnings. She issued judgments. She wielded citations like throwing knives. Your paint is the wrong shade of green. That's $200 a day. Your child's sandbox visible from the road. Remove it or face legal action. Front porch too wide. Demolish it. She was a tyrant, disguised as an administrator, and she had an army, not of men, but of procedures, an enforcement officer named Jeff, the same man with the clipboard and crowbar from that morning. Wasn't even licensed. He wasn't bonded, badged, or certified. Just some middle-aged bulldog with a power complex and a patch that said HOA inspector he probably bought online. They called themselves a restoration board. I called them what they were, opportunists, squatters in a defunct system, reviving a dead HOA not to protect the neighborhood, but to control it and profit from it. Fred warned me. Karen's been doing this for years, finds old subdivisions, revives the HOA on paper, installs herself as president, then bleeds the homeowners dry until they sell. Then she flips the lots. She can't do that, I said. Fred just laughed. Son, you were a soldier. You know what it's like when the enemy writes the rule book. What made Karen dangerous wasn't that she was smart. It was that she had no shame, no moral ceiling, no accountability. She was the queen of a kingdom that shouldn't exist. But in Millersville, it did, because no one had ever pushed back until now. The violation notice was taped to our front door, again. But this time, there was something new scribbled in red ink. Final warning. Non-compliance will result in family welfare review. Family welfare review? Kylie read it 3 times before she looked up at me. Her hands were trembling. They're threatening to call CPS, she whispered. For what? For having a sandbox? For a missing permit on a porch swing? We didn't sleep that night. Michael had a fever. Kylie sat on the floor with him, wrapped in blankets, humming lullabies under her breath while staring at the door like someone was going to come through it. I kept watch by the window, shotgun cradled across my lap, eyes burning with rage and disbelief. They weren't just targeting me now. They were targeting us. And then, 3 days later, they did the unthinkable. It was a Thursday. I remember because it was trash day and I'd just taken the bins out. Kylie was on the porch in a robe, pregnant belly heavy under the morning sun. Michael was playing with wooden blocks beside her. That's when the black SUV pulled up. 2 men stepped out, suits, sunglasses, government walk. One had a clipboard. The other had a badge that said, County Child Protective Services. I approached calmly. My voice was low. What's this about? We received an anonymous report of endangerment, the clipboard guy said. Well, unstable housing, potential mold, reports of shouting, unverified firearm exposure. We're conducting a wellness check. Kylie went pale. You're here because of Karen, I said. They didn't answer. Instead, they asked to see our child, to inspect our home, to take photos. And just like that, we were no longer homeowners. We were suspects. No charges, no due process, just fear, the state kind. The kind that knocks with a warrant-shaped shadow and threatens to take what you love most. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten them. I let them in. And I documented everything. They poked through the nursery, took photos of our pantry, asked Kylie if I ever got aggressive. She laughed, a dry, broken thing, and asked them to leave. When they finally left, Michael was crying. Kylie was crying, and I made a promise. This was no longer about property rights. It was about war. They had touched the sacred. They came after my family. And now I was going to burn their little empire to the ground. At first, I thought it was just Karen, a petty tyrant with delusions of royalty. But I was wrong. Karen was just the face. The real enemy was the machine, the system. After the CPS visit, things escalated fast. Faster than I thought possible. I received 3 separate violation notices in 1 week, all citing different rules that didn't exist. One was for unauthorized shrubbery. Another claimed my front steps were hazardously misaligned. The third? Non-compliant window trim color. That one came with a $1,000 fine. I started calling lawyers. None would take the case. The moment I mentioned HOA, I got the same answer. Not worth the fight. Fred tried to help. He gave me a binder of old documents, minutes from HOA meetings before it was dissolved. Proof it had no authority. But every time I presented it, I was met with blank stares or bureaucratic shrugs. The town hall clerk said, well, if it's been reactivated, they might have legal standing. Hard to say. The bank held our renovation loan. They cited pending municipal disputes. The insurance company sent a letter threatening to drop us due to code violation risk. The heat wasn't just legal, it was social. Fred told me that some neighbors stopped answering his calls. One couple moved out in the middle of the night. Another family had their fence mysteriously destroyed. And when they complained, they were slapped with $3,000 in property damage fees. It wasn't just fines. It was character assassination. One evening, a blog post appeared online, anonymous but specific. It accused me of being an unhinged veteran with PTSD, unfit to raise a child, living in unsafe conditions with an unstable pregnant wife. I found out later it had been shared by Karen's real estate firm's private Facebook group. Kylie cried when she saw it. Michael began stuttering in his sleep, and I started recording everything. I installed hidden cameras. I kept a logbook. I had audio files, time-stamped, showing Jeff trespassing without notice. I even caught him lifting a section of our fence to photograph our son's play area. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Then I got a letter, not from Karen, not from the county. It was from a shell company, Evergreen Civic Consultants, LLC. They acquired oversight of community regulations in Millersville, including legacy deed enforcement rights. Their letter was clean, professional, and terrifying. They cited zoning precedents from 1979. They included images of our home taken by drone. They weren't just trying to find me, they were trying to erase me. Every tactic had one goal: wear us down, break us, push us to sell. Fred whispered over coffee one night, "That's the playbook. Squeeze till you fold, then they buy you out cheap. Flip it, profit. HOA is just the hammer. They're holding the real nails." By now, Kylie was on anxiety meds. Michael had stopped playing outside. I barely slept. We were one notice away from collapse. And that's when I stopped reacting and started planning. I sat in the garage one night with the lights off, listening to a recording of my own voice. It was from my helmet cam years ago. Fallujah, dust, gunfire in the distance. My voice was calm even when chaos screamed around me. "Stay low, watch the ridge, clear every corner." That voice didn't sound like me anymore. The man in that recording was steady, focused, a soldier with purpose. The man I'd become? He was just a father, pacing in his garage, plotting against a corrupt homeowners association. What the hell was I doing? Was I really about to go to war with a woman named Karen and real estate shell company? Was this my new battlefield? Then I looked at the wall, at Kylie's ultrasound photo, at Michael's finger paintings taped to the fridge behind me, and I knew the answer. Yes, this was the battlefield, and it was the only one that ever really mattered. Still, something inside me hesitated. It wasn't fear, it was identity. You spend 12 years fighting monsters overseas. You learn one thing: the hardest part is not becoming them. But the truth is, sometimes to take down a monster, you have to speak its language. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted proof. I wanted every lie documented, every threat recorded, every abuse traced back to the source. And then I wanted to burn their whole game down, legally, publicly, permanently. But first, I had to cross a line. I had to stop being the guy who just wanted peace, because peace was no longer an option. So I made 3 decisions that night. I created a fake identity, a digital ghost, to infiltrate Karen's company newsletter list under a different name. I hired a private investigator to follow Jeff, the enforcer. I told him, find out what this guy eats, where he sleeps, who he answers to. I opened an LLC, not just any company, a real estate acquisition firm, silent, empty, but on paper, completely legitimate. If Karen wanted to weaponize paperwork, so would I. If she used shell companies to control neighborhoods, then I'd use one to buy hers out from under her. I wasn't backing down anymore. I was about to go full Spectre, infiltrate her system, hijack her power, and cut off her air supply from the inside. And when I was done, there wouldn't be a kingdom left for her to rule. The first thread unraveled on a Tuesday. Fred called me after dark. No greeting. Just, you were right. She's laundering. He'd been digging, old school style. Property records, tax maps, building permits. What he found was a spider web. Karen wasn't just reviving old HOAs. She was using them as a front to acquire distressed properties through intimidation, convert them via rezoning loopholes, and flip them through a series of LLCs registered out of Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Her name was never on anything directly, but one name kept coming up. Glenridge Holdings, LLC. The company I'd received threats from weeks earlier? Same one. She wasn't just the president of a defunct HOA, she was the ghost CEO of an entire acquisition pipeline. And it got worse. Glenridge Holdings had direct financial ties to Delphi Evergreen Trust, a real estate hedge fund run by her ex-husband. Fred found divorce documents. Inside was a non-compete clause Karen had fought to have removed, specifically so she could continue expansion activities under civic jurisdiction protections. Translation, she negotiated to keep blackmailing homeowners as part of the divorce settlement. She wasn't hiding her tactics. She'd fought to protect them. Meanwhile, my private investigator came back with intel on Jeff, the so-called enforcer, real name, Jeffrey T. Myers, ex-cop, dishonorably discharged after a domestic abuse investigation that mysteriously disappeared from public record. Guess who helped him transition into private sector compliance enforcement? Karen. They'd worked together before on 2 other HOA revival cases in different counties. Same pattern: revitalize, penalize, seize. But the biggest break didn't come from my PI or Fred. It came from a janitor, a quiet man named Ellis, who worked overnight shifts in the building Karen's consulting office was registered under. I bumped into him while staking out the building. We got to talking. He said, "You the guy with the kid and the fence?" I froze. Then he said, "She's been recording you." My blood turned to ice. Ellis told me Karen had a back office, not on the lease, hidden behind a storage closet. Inside, files, printed photos, audio logs. She brags about it, he said. Says every neighborhood's a casino. She just plays the house. I paid him cash for access. What I found that night was a black site for legal extortion. There were files on me, yes, but also on dozens of other families. Mental health records, divorce threats, CPS reports, even a copy of Fred's late wife's medical bills with red notes scrawled beside it. Wait until tax lien hits. She was weaponizing pain, and she was good at it. In the back corner of the room, beneath a lockbox, I found a journal. Not hers, but old, dated, yellowed. It belonged to her mother. Inside were pages and pages of notes detailing land acquisitions from the late 70s. Everyone followed the same strategy: civic weaponization, elder coercion, forced sales, profit margins. Karen wasn't an anomaly. She was legacy. She was born into a bloodline of property vultures. She wasn't running a rogue HOA. She was running a dynasty. And I realized then this wasn't about my house. It never was. It was about control, territory, empire. And I was done playing defense. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a reckoning, but it had to be strategic, surgical. I'd fought insurgencies. I knew if you want to take down a system, you can't just aim at the queen. You have to cut the veins feeding her empire. So I built a 3-front war. Front 1, the paper trail, legal. Fred and I gathered every document we had, from fake violations to illegal liens to forged HOA votes. With the help of a sympathetic junior lawyer from his church, we filed 3 complaints. One to the State Attorney General's office for HOA fraud and abuse of power. One to the County Tax Board questioning the validity of Evergreen Civic Consultants Charter. One to the Internal Revenue Service, flagging Karen's LLCs for potential nonprofit tax fraud and asset misreporting. The AG assigned an investigator. The IRS opened a preliminary case. We weren't in court yet, but the wheels had started turning. Front 2, the mic drop, media. Using a burner email, I tipped off a local tabloid reporter known for covering corruption porn. I sent redacted screenshots of Karen's blackmail files, Jeff's assault cover-up, and a drone photo of my backyard with the caption, "They want to take my child for this." It took less than 48 hours for the article to go viral. Headline, HOA from hell. Pregnant wife threatened by fake enforcer over sandbox. Karen's face was blurred in the images, but her company name was not. Her office phone was disconnected by the end of the week. Her website was hacked 2 days later, not by me, but by some anonymous white hat vigilantes who wrote, "You picked the wrong family." Then came the public support. People sent letters. Former victims of Karen's other HOAs began posting testimonies online. A Reddit thread titled "Karen Norwood Exposed" hit the front page. A podcast episode featured Fred reading from the Legacy Journal. She was no longer a quiet storm. She was a trending disgrace. Front 3, the coup de grace, ownership. This was the hardest part. Remember that LLC I registered? I named it Silent Vale Properties. Through it, I began acquiring voting rights in the HOA's paper structure. See, Karen had manipulated the deed structure so that certain abandoned lots still counted toward voting shares, lots she assumed were worthless and inactive. But I knew better. With Fred's help, we tracked down absentee owners. Some lived out of state. Some had died. But a few were willing to sign over proxy voting rights to my company in exchange for as little as $50. It took 3 weeks. In the end, I had controlling interest over 57% of the HOA charter's voting power, and I called a meeting. Karen showed up in pearls. Jeff showed up with a fresh bandage on his arm. He'd been attacked outside his apartment. No suspects. I walked in with a thumb drive. "This is a special board session," I said calmly, "to vote on the immediate removal of all acting officers due to gross misconduct, violation of fiduciary duty, and criminal activity under Title 13, Section 242. Karen laughed. until Fred walked in and handed her the voting ledger. When she realized I owned the majority, she stopped laughing. I pressed play on the thumb drive. Audio clips of her threatening homeowners. Jeff bragging about scaring the wife. Her voice saying, "We'll take the kid if we have to." She stood up. Too late. The door opened. 2 men in suits entered. FBI. They weren't there for HOA violations. They were there for racketeering, fraud, and money laundering. Karen tried to run. Jeff reached for the door. They both went down in cuffs. The final meeting was held in the Millersville Community Center. Neutral ground. Karen insisted on it. She still believed this was salvageable, that with enough legalese and thinly veiled threats, she could twist the narrative back into her control. She walked in like royalty. Silk blouse, diamonds on her wrist, binder full of false confidence. Jeff wasn't with her. He was already facing charges. But she brought a new legal rep, some poor sap who barely looked up from his phone. I stood at the front of the room, calm as a sniper, thumb drive in my pocket, Fred on my left. The projector screen behind me flickered on. Karen scanned the crowd. Smaller than usual. Mostly old residents, a few local reporters. Her lips curled into that same smug half smile she'd worn the first time I met her. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said. I smiled. "I understand exactly what I'm doing." "Do you?" she snapped. "Because this HOA was designed to protect value, to maintain standards. You think you're the hero? You're just another squatter in a system built before you were even born." I leaned in. "No, I'm the reckoning the system forgot to expect," she scoffed. "What do you want? Apology? Money? You want me to step down? Fine. I'll resign, we'll settle this in arbitration, and I'll walk out of here." Fred stood up. "Not today." I inserted the thumb drive. The screen changed. A silent video. Karen in her office, whispering into her phone. "Threaten her with custody. She'll fold. They always do." The room gasped. Another clip. Karen approving wire transfers to Glenridge Holdings. Unreported, undeclared. Another. Jeff laughing. "Don't worry, Karen. If he swings, I'll be ready." She didn't flinch. Not at first. Then the door opened. 2 FBI agents entered, slow and deliberate. They didn't raise their voices. Just said, "Karen Norwood, you're under federal investigation for racketeering, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit property extortion." For the first time, she looked human, not scared, not sorry, just exposed. She turned to me as they cuffed her. "You think this ends with me?" I nodded. "No, but it starts with you." They walked her out. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked back once and vanished into the flashing lights outside. The cottage is quiet again. Not the scared kind of quiet. Not the check the windows, listen for tires on gravel kind. No, this silence is earned. It's peace. Karen's empire collapsed like a house built on termites. Her LLCs were seized. Glenridge Holdings was dismantled by a federal audit. Jeff pled out and disappeared into the system. More than a dozen families came forward. Their testimonies helped the investigation stretch into 3 counties. The HOA dissolved permanently. Fred was elected as the new chair of the Community Preservation Council, which ironically does nothing but make sure no HOA will ever rise again. He runs it like a librarian, quiet, respectful, and allergic to drama. Kylie finally slept through the night. She gave birth to our second child, a daughter. We named her Grace. Michael runs outside now. No stutter, no fear, just full-bellied laughter as he races squirrels and dares the wind to catch him. Me? I rebuilt the porch, but I left one panel unfinished, on purpose. Burned into the wood is a single line. Peace is not the absence of war, but the courage to defend it. There's a new garden behind the house. Fred helped plant it. Lavender, rosemary, and a single stone at the center engraved, "In memory of Michael, the son we almost lost, and the strength we found because of him." Every petal that grows is a reminder. We didn't just survive, we rebuilt. Not to get revenge, not to win headlines, but because home should mean something. It should be more than walls and deeds and bylaws. It should be safe. And now, finally, it is. 3 weeks after the dust settled, I got a letter. No return address, no postmark. Just a single cream-colored envelope slid under our front door sometime in the early morning hours. Inside was a business card, black, no logo, no title. Just an embossed name, R. Norwood, and a handwritten note on the back. My sister always played too loud, but she wasn't the only one with keys to the kingdom. I stared at it for a long time. R. Norwood. Raymond, Rebecca, Richard, another sibling, a cousin, a partner. The handwriting was elegant, measured, deliberate. This wasn't some angry leftover loyalist trying to scare me. This was a warning. Or maybe an invitation. Fred didn't like it. "You don't poke ghosts, son," he muttered. "You let the ashes cool." But I knew better. This wasn't over. Karen may have built the weapon, but someone else funded it. And I had just exposed a multi-state racket that threatened some very expensive power. They weren't done, which meant neither was I. I slipped the card into a folder labeled Phase 2, locked it in a safe beneath my tool bench, and kissed my daughter goodnight. Because if another war was coming, I'd be ready. If you've ever been bullied by an HOA, silenced by paperwork, or watched someone threaten your family behind a fake badge, you're not alone. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to every neighbor who got fined for a garden hose, every family who was told they didn't fit the aesthetic, every single parent who cried over a notice they didn't understand. So, if you're reading this, if any part of this hits home, share it. Speak up. Tell your story. Send it to me. Because they count on your silence. But silence is exactly what they lose when we speak as one.